Well, kind of like how I've been feeling lately. It's been so-so, and kind of have an idea where things are going. However, you might have a few moments you need to buckle up. You know what I mean, as it's time for another episode of... Hi there, it's Brett Hornby here, and welcome back to my YouTube channel, and welcome back to another episode of my Calgary Hitmen in 6. We're up to Season 4, this will be episode number 8, as we'll talk about games 37 to 42 in the WHL schedule for the 2021-22 season. As in the last episode I did start off, it was the trade deadline where the Calgary Hitmen did some selling off some assets when they traded away Adam Kidd and Jackson Vandeleest. I just think with the way things are looking right now with the Calgary Hitmen, they are definitely a distant third in the Central Division. However, I think they might have to look over their shoulder for the Lethbridge Hurricanes when we get to the stats and standings. So anyway, before I get into my notes and recap how the past 6 games went for the Calgary Hitmen, if you want to follow along with this Calgary sports fans journey, home to the Flames, Hitmen, Roughnecks, and Stampeders, I mostly do talk Calgary sports on my YouTube channel. We recap games and stories, but I do have a variety of sports content on my channel. When I have time and just feel like making a video, like personal vlogs, attempt at comedy, do share my experience today I'm on the road or a sporting event, and I've done some vlogging to go, which hopefully I can get back into doing that more when it warms up for the winter, as well as Chinook Blast, which I'm definitely waiting until the Family Day weekend to take that all in. So if that all sounds like be interesting to watch, to follow along with this Calgary sports fans journey, you know what you do, just make sure you hit like, subscribe. I also have my other social medias down in the description below for always to follow me. Of course, I got my second channel in Brett Hornby Shorts, where I exclusively put my short form content on that channel, so I appreciate like, subscribe both here on my main channel as well as my second channel. And of course, with these game recap videos, I do put timestamps in the description below if you want to jump to any particular section or game. And I'm going to say with a couple games in this recap segment, there's some moments I'm going to say you need to buckle up, as there were a couple wild games thrown in this episode that could be something to look forward to. So if I bring up my notes, let's bring up the task ahead and talk about how things went for our junior hockey team the last 6 games. So starting off this episode, we go back to game 37. This happened on Friday, January the 28th, as the Calgary Hitmen were at home hosting the Lethbridge Hurricanes. This was a 7 p.m. puck drop at the Scotiabank Saddledome the last weekend of January. The Calgary Hitmen were busy as they had 3 games in 3 nights. So how did things go? Starting off with the Lethbridge Hurricanes, well, I always got to throw out there the Lethbridge Hurricanes, the former Calgary Wranglers from the Calgary Hitmen Corral series. Well, things did not start off that good for the Calgary Hitmen, as first goal went to the Lethbridge Hurricanes as it went to Justin Hull on a shorthanded goal. This happened at the 7:41 minute mark of the first period. It was 19th of the season. So Lethbridge strikes first with a 1-0 lead. And they also added to that lead just past the midway point of the first period at 10:20 to be exact. It was Ty Nash who scored for the Hurricanes. That was his 11th of the season. So it was 2-0 for Lethbridge in the first period, and that's how things stood after the first period. Lethbridge taking a 2-0 lead. So not a good start for the Calgary Hitmen, as you know, despite the fact that the Hitmen were down, they had the slight edge in play in shots on goal. However, the second period, things were starting to look better for the Calgary Hitmen. So Calgary got on the board. It wasn't until the 6:16 minute mark of the second period, it was Zach Funk who got his 12th goal of the season. So now it was 2-1 Lethbridge at that point in the second period. And then that was actually the only goal for the Calgary Hitmen and in the game. So we had a 2-1 game for the Lethbridge Hurricanes going into the third period, despite the fact that the Calgary Hitmen continued to outplay the Lethbridge Hurricanes, and they definitely outplayed them a lot more in the third period. So going into the third period, well, Calgary finally got awarded with a goal, and no relation to Bobby. It was Briggsor, number 6. He got his first goal of the season. He is a defenseman with the last name Orr, but he's American. He actually scored his first at 5:29 to tie up the game at 2-2. So we had a 2-2 game for the Calgary Hitmen, despite the fact that the Lethbridge Hurricanes took a double minor early in the first period. Calgary was not able to capitalize until after that double minor with that goal. So it was almost a late power play goal, without officially being a power play goal. So the game was tied at 2-2. Calgary was still outplaying the Lethbridge Hurricanes. However, there was no more goals, so you know what I like to say, this one needs overtime. However, in overtime, despite the fact that the Lethbridge Hurricanes had a penalty that carried over into overtime, they eventually scored the overtime winner shorthanded. It was a 4-on-3 as the Calgary Hitmen had the extra attacker on the ice. However, it was Justin Hull who got his second of the game, 20th season, 39 seconds in. So ultimately, the Lethbridge Hurricanes, I'm going to say, stole this one with a 3-2 overtime victory, despite the fact that the Calgary Hitmen outshot the Lethbridge Hurricanes 39-21 overall, but that was the only shot in the game in overtime was behind the net for the Lethbridge Hurricanes. So leading the way for the Calgary Hitmen, while Briggs Orr had a goal and assist, and he was the only player for Calgary that had a multi-point game. So on the Lethbridge Hurricanes side of the puck, well, Justin Hull obviously led the way with the 2 goals, the opening goal and the overtime winner. And then it was Alex Thatcher who had 2 assists for the Lethbridge Hurricanes, so he was a part on 2 of the 3 goals for Lethbridge, including the overtime winner. So when it comes to the goaltending star of the game, it was Braden Peters who was in net for Calgary. He made 18 saves on 21 shots, while it was Jared Fickett who was in net for the Lethbridge Hurricanes. I'm going to say he had a much busier game. He made 37 saves on 39 shots. So that was game number 37 for the Calgary Hitmen. Not quite off to a good start, but at least we salvaged a point for this episode. So game 38, this happened the next night as the Calgary Hitmen were on the road as they went 3 hours east on the Trans-Canada as they were taking on the Medicine Hat Tigers at Co-op Place. This was a 7 p.m. puck drop. I'm going to tell you when you need to buckle up and to batten your hatches in this one, because this one was a wild game. However, you didn't have any indication of that in the first period, as just like the previous game, ultimately it was Medicine Hat that did score the first goal, and it was the only goal in the first period. It was Owen McNeil who scored at the 9:55 minute mark of the first period. That was his 6th of the season, so Medicine Hat took a 1-0 lead, and that's how things stood after the first period. Medicine Hat leading 1-0. We'll highlight some rough stuff here, as there was not too many penalties in this game. However, the only penalties that were dished out in the first period in this game was 13:54. There was a fighting, as Zach Funk was fighting with Eric Parsons. However, Calgary took up the extra unsportsmanlike conduct, so that was some spark in the first period. However, the game did not get interesting yet, so you don't need to buckle up or batten the hatches just yet. So 1-0 for Medicine Hat after the first period. So going into the second period, the Calgary Hitmen was able to get themselves on the board, as in the second period it was Brendan Wynot who scored his 4th of the season at the 5:40 minute mark. So now the game is tied at 1-1. And then later in the period, it was just over 5 minutes later, at 10:24, or 10:54 I meant to say, Calgary took a 2-1 lead, as it was Anthony Yakushin who got his 3rd goal of the season. So Calgary took a 2-1 lead, and that's how things stood after the second period. There were no penalties in the second period. And then when I looked at penalties, so there was just a couple of interference penalties early in the third period. However, it was 2-1 for Calgary after the second period. But third period, this is where I'm going to say you need to buckle up and batten up the hatches, because this game got very interesting in the third period. More interesting than it needed to be, I would say, for someone who is a Calgary Hitmen fan. So going into the third period with the goaltender interference penalties that the Medicine Hat Tigers took, the Calgary Hitmen was able to capitalize on it, as it was Zach Funk who got his 13th goal of the season on the power play at exactly the 2-minute mark of the third period. So Calgary took a 3-1 lead at that point. And then the next goal in the third period did not happen until just before the 11-minute mark. At exactly 10:57, Calgary adds to their lead, made it 4-1, as it was Blake Stevenson who got his 16th of the season. So now Calgary led 4-1. Keep in mind, the Medicine Hat Tigers are one of the bottom teams in the league, so given this matchup, Calgary should be able to win this game. Well, it looked like Calgary was able to, maybe run away with this one, as they were up 4-1 at this point of the game. They made it 5-1, as it was Anton Ancievich who got his second goal of the season at 12:04. So Calgary led 5-1. You're thinking, with 8 minutes to go, Calgary up by 4 goals. What crazy stuff could happen? Well, Medicine Hat, they got within 3 as they scored at the 14-15 minute mark. Their first goal of the third period was Logan Bargaligi, who got his 9th of the season. So now it was 5-2 for Calgary at that point. However, just over 19 seconds later, it was Mason Finley who got his first goal of the season for the Calgary Hitmen. So now it is 6-2. 6-2 for Calgary. Keep note of that at the 14:34 minute mark. So things were still looking good, and it was still 6-2 for Calgary going into the final 2 minutes of the third period. However, buckle up, batten the hatches. Things definitely got wild in this one. Well, at the 18:23 minute mark, it was Rhett Parsons who scored for the Medicine Hat Tigers, his 3rd of the season. So now the game is 6-3. Literally 19 seconds later, Medicine Hat now makes it a 2-goal game, as it was Tegu Patton who got his 7th of the season at 18:42. So now it is 6-4 for Calgary. And then Logan Barlegi scored at the 19:32 minute mark with 28 seconds to go, his 10th of the season, to make it 6-5 for Calgary. So suddenly Medicine Hat had 3 goals in a minute and 49 span in the final 2 minutes of the third period to make it 6-5. However, let's hold your breath. Thankfully, the Calgary Hitmen were able to hang on and win a wild one, 6-5, as there were 8 goals scored in the third period alone, as there was 4 apiece, as Calgary had 4 goals and Medicine Hat had 4 goals in the third period. Well, ultimately, Calgary was on the right end of this wild one, winning the one 6-5. Calgary also outshot the Medicine Hat Tigers 30-27, so I felt this one definitely was more interesting than it needed to be, given the matchup. So leading the way for the Calgary Hitmen, there were a few players that had a few multi-point games. It was Mason Finley with a goal and assist. It was Blake Stevenson with a goal and assist, as well as Anton Yagashan with a goal and assist. And it was Sean Shigell. He had 3 assists in this game. So the Medicine Hat Tigers, a couple multi-point games go to Daniel Baker with 2 assists. And of course Logan Barlegi, who had 2 goals and assists, as well as McNeil had a goal and assist. So those were the multi-point getters for the Calgary Hitmen and the Medicine Hat Tigers. So when it comes to the goaltending story of this game, well, it was Ethan Bonaventure who was in net for the Calgary. He made 22 saves on 27 shots, so maybe there was some jitters. He got too complacent. Medicine Hat, well, it was Gavin Borkland who was in net for Medicine Hat for most of the game, He made 23 saves on 20 shots before he got replaced by Beckett Linkow, who had one save on 2 shots. So didn't realize he was suddenly going to be in a heck of a game after the goaltending change. So it was definitely quite a game 38, I would say, for the Calgary Hitmen, but they all count the same no matter how it was done. But it was definitely a wild one. So that was game 38. Let's all take a breath. Alright. So game 39, this happened on Sunday, January the 30th, as the Calgary Hitmen went back to Calgary as they were hosting the Swift Current Broncos. This was a 4 p.m. puck drop at the Scotiabank Saddledome. So after a wild one against the Medicine Hat Tigers, and after losing one in overtime the night before that, how did things go for the Calgary Hitmen against the Swift Current Broncos? Well, unlike the previous 2 games, it was the Calgary Hitmen who actually scored first in this one, as it was Maxim Mironov who got his 4th of the season at 8:51 of the first period. So Calgary takes a 1-0 lead, and that's actually how things stood. After the first period, the Calgary Hitmen have a 1-0 lead. However, the Swift Current Broncos, they definitely fought back in the second period, as first it was Josh Shillman for the Swift Current Broncos. He scored his 17th of the season at 5:59 the second period to tie this thing up at 1-1. And then there was Owen Pickering, who scored his 7th of the season for the Swift Current Broncos later in the second period at 14:31 to make it 2-1 for Swift Current. And actually, that's how things stood at the second period, with Swift Current leading 2-1. So going into the third period, Calgary looked like they were pressing back against the Swift Current Broncos, as they were also the better team matchup-wise. However, they were not able to get rewarded until later in the third period, as that was 12:43 of the third period. It was Zach Funk who got his 14th of the season to tie up the game at 2-2. However, Swift Current Broncos, actually a couple minutes later, they decided we want to still be back in front, as it was Josh Davies who got his 12th of the season at 14:31. So just almost 2 minutes later, after Zach Funk tied it up for Calgary, it was Swift Current who takes a 3-2 lead. And ultimately, Swift Current did put this one away, as when Calgary pulled the goalie for the extra attacker, it was Josh Philman who got his 2nd of the game in the empty net at 19:34 the third period. So ultimately, it was the Swift Current Broncos who take this one 4-2. So Calgary had a 1-1-1 3-game set to end off January. So leading the way for the Calgary Hitmen was Zach Funk, was the only player with a multi-point game, with 1 goal and 1 assist. And when it comes to the Swift Current Broncos, well, obviously Josh Philman led the way with 2 goals and an assist, as for Raphael Pelche, who had 3 assists as well for the Swift Current Broncos. So goaltending story of this game, it was Braden Peters who was back in net for Calgary. He made 18 saves on 21 shots. While it was Puche for Swift Current was a little busier. He made 35 saves on 37 shots, as the Calgary Hitmen actually outshot the Swift Current Broncos 37-22 in this one, but unfortunately they were on the wrong end of it with a 4-2 loss to wrap up January and weekend. So that was game number 39. So game 40, Calgary had a week off, as they were back on the ice on Sunday, February the 6th, as they were still at home hosting the Regina Pats. This was a 2 p.m. puck drop at the Scotiabank Saddledome. I'm going to say this one also was another relatively wild game, as I would say. Not too sure if you should buckle your seatbelt as tightly or batten the hatches as much compared to the Medicine Hat game. But there was definitely a load of offense in this game throughout the game. But starting off in this game, it was Calgary who was up first, as it was Steele Queering, one of the new players that they acquired at the trade deadline. He scored his 8th of the season for Calgary at 11:25. So Calgary opens up the scoring 1-0. However, they actually made it 2-0. Late in the first period, it was Oliver Tulk who got his 7th of the season at 18:07. So Calgary takes a 2-0 lead, and that's how things stood after the first period. Calgary also, or actually it was Regina, they outshot Calgary 16-8, and Regina in this game outshot Calgary for much of the game, but the third period was things got interesting, because the second period, I got no scoring to report, because no goals, so it was still 2-0 for Calgary. Going into the third period, now this is where things get a little interesting. And may I also add that with the Regina Pats, they also have Connor Bedard, who is favored to be the first overall pick in the 2023 NHL entry draft. Well, it was Connor Bedard who scored his 23rd of the season to get Regina on the board at 2:57. So now it was 2-1 for the Calgary Hitmen at that point. However, literally 10 seconds later, on the opening face-off, Calgary regains the 2-goal lead, as it was Blake Allen, as I meant to say, who scored his 5th of the season. So now Calgary had a 3-1 lead. Going later into the third period, Regina gets within 1, as it was Riker Evans who got his 9th of the season at 11:16 of the third period. So now it was 3-2 for Calgary at that point of the game. And then Connor Bedard struck again for the Regina Pats to tie up the game, this time on the power play, his 24th of the season at 13:35. So now we had a 3-3 game at this point. And then just over a minute later, a minute 1 to be exact, Regina now takes a 4-3 lead, as it was Riker Evans got his 2nd of the game, his 10th of the season. So now Regina leads 4-3. Now going into the final minutes of the third period, Calgary pulled their goalie looking for the extra attacker. Still down 4-3. Well, this is one of those times where that actually works, as Calgary also had a beneficiary of a late power play on a high sticking penalty. That Calgary was able to take advantage of that, and it was Braden Slipman who got his 7th of the season at 19:48 of the third period with literally 12 seconds to go to tie this game up at 4-4. So, as I like to say, this one needed overtime. And then going into overtime, the Calgary Hitmen only had one shot, but the only shot they needed was worked, as it was Sean Shigero who got his 19th of the season 32 seconds in. So the Calgary Hitmen ultimately won this one in a wild fashion with a 5-4 victory, as they scored with 12 seconds to go in the third period. And Connor Bedard definitely still entertained the fans. So I guess it was a win-win for everybody in this one, as they say the Calgary Hitmen won this one 5-4 in overtime. However, when it comes to shots on goal, it was the Regina Pats. They outshot the Calgary Hitmen in this one, as Regina outshot Calgary 50-31 in this one, including 1-0 for Calgary in overtime. But ultimately, as I said, the Calgary Hitmen won this one 5-4 in overtime, so leading the way for the Calgary Hitmen, while Lethbridge Shipman, who had a goal and assist, definitely had the big goal when it needed the most, and he was actually the only player with a multi-point game for the Calgary Hitmen, while the Regina Pats, it was Riker Evans who had 2 goals, and Connor Bedard had 2 goals and 1 assist. So those are the 2 players that had multi-point games for the Pats. So the goaltending story of this game, well, Braden Peters definitely was the busier goalie. He made 46 saves on 50 shots, while it was Matthew Kuiper who got in the net for the Regina Pats. He made 26 saves on 31 shots. So that was the Calgary Hitmen against the Regina Pats for game number 40, as I shall say. So game 41, this happened on Tuesday, February 8th, as the Calgary Hitmen were spending some time on the road in Saskatchewan. This time they were taking on the Prince Albert Raiders. This was a 5 or 6 p.m. puck drop at the Art Hauser Center. How did the Regina Pats, or the Calgary Hitmen, fare against the Prince Albert Raiders? Well, in the first period, it was once again the Calgary Hitmen who actually scored the first goal, as it was Brandon Wynot who got his 5th of the season. This happened at the 13-16 minute mark, so Calgary takes a 1-0 lead at this game. However, the Raiders definitely came back later in the first period, as it was at the 17-14 minute mark of the first period. Tanem Galeason, who got his third of the season, to make it a 1-1 game, and that's how things stood after the first period. Hitmen and Raiders tied up at 1-1. So going into the second period, it was the Prince Albert Raiders that enjoyed their first lead of the game to make it 2-1, as it was Cale Saunders who scored his 9th of the season at 6:53. So as mentioned, Prince Albert Raiders now has a 2-1 lead. At this point, however, the Calgary Hitmen was able to get back into this game on a beneficiary of a power play, as it was Blake Stevenson who got his 17th goal of the season. Also one of the newer players that we acquired at the deadline. This is at the 17:39 minute mark, so it was 2-2 at that point. So just like out of the first period, the game was still tied up at 2-2 as each team trading goals. But the third period definitely sunk the Calgary Hitmen, as I would say, because going into the third period, the Prince Albert Raiders definitely came to life and took this one away. First, it was Prince Albert making a 3-2 game, as it was Keaton Sorensen who got his 8th of the season at 4:59. Now 3-2 Prince Albert. And then they scored exactly 4 minutes later, at 8:59, as it was Cale Saunders who got his second of the game, to make it 4-2 for Prince Albert. And then Calgary once again pulling the goalie for the extra attacker, where Prince Albert was able to put this one away, as it was Landon Cozier who got his 10th goal of the season at 18:32. So ultimately, Prince Albert won this one 5-2, as they also outshot the Calgary Hitmen 38-32 in this one. So Calgary didn't start off this Saskatchewan road trip, I know, by losing this one 5-2. No one on the Calgary Hitmen had a multi-point game that stood out, but the Prince Albert Raiders, I mentioned Cale Saunders who had 2 goals, as well as 2 assists goes to Blake Vitek and Carlin Latner. So those are the players that stood out for the Prince Albert Raiders with multi-point games. So the goaltending story of this game, well, Braden Peters was in net. He made 33 saves on 37 shots. Well, it was, Braden Peters. It was Tikian Chika who got in net for the Prince Albert Raiders. He made 30 saves on 32 shots. So that was game 41, as the Calgary Hitmen lost their first game in Saskatchewan on this road trip with a 5-2 loss. So game 42, this will be the last game I'll recap before I move on to other business in the video. As the Calgary Hitmen were playing the next night on Wednesday, February 9th, as they were still on the road in Saskatchewan, this time taking on the Saskatoon Blades. This was a 6 p.m. puck drop at the SaskTel Center. So how did things go in Saskatoon for Calgary, I should say? Well, Calgary, like the last few games, they scored the first goal. I think they had this 4th game in a row that they scored the first goal, as it was Zach Funk who scored his 15th of the season at 6:12. So Calgary takes an early 1-0 lead. However, the Saskatoon Blades came back later in the first period. It was Cale Cernovich who got his 27th of the season at 14:52. So it was a 1-1 game at that point, and that's how things stood after the first period, with both teams tied up at 1-1. So now going into the second period, the Calgary Hitmen actually was able to regain the lead, as it was Cale Zimmerman who got his 10th of the season, newly minted captain, I should say, after the Jackson Vandalies got traded to the Rebels at the deadline. He scored at 11:58. So Calgary regained the lead at 2-1, and that's actually how things stood after the second period. The Calgary Hitmen up 2-1 against Saskatoon Blades Saskatoon. However, this game was almost like a carbon copy of the previous game against the Prince Albert Raiders, as the third period went to the Saskatchewan-based team. However, I'm going to say this one, it was definitely a lot more quicker and dramatic, that this one got put away for the Saskatoon Blades, for the Saskatchewan-based team. It wasn't until the 13:33 minute mark of the third period, Saskatoon ties it up at 2-2, as it was Rick Reinhardt who got his 6th of the season to make it a 2-2 game. And then it was Kyle Shinovic got his second goal of the game at 17-11 to make it 3-2 for Saskatoon. And then the Calgary Hitmen did pull the goalie looking for the extra attacker to tie up the game. However, once again, it was Kyle Shinovic who got his third of the game for the hat-trick. 29th of the season at 19:01 of the third period. So ultimately, it was the Saskatoon Blades who won this one 4-2, and that's how this one ends for this episode, as the Calgary Hitmen had a couple of wild games, but they lost a couple in Saskatchewan. So the only player that had a multi-point game for the Calgary Hitmen was Zach Funk with a goal and assist. And obviously leading the way for the Saskatoon Blades was Kyle Shinovic with 3 goals with a hat-trick, as well as Reinhardt, who had a goal and assist. As mentioned, the shots on goal in this one, it was 33-32 for Saskatoon, so it was an evenly played game in that front. So when it comes to the goaltending story of the game, it was Ethan Bonaventure, the backup, who was in net. He made 29 saves on 32 shots, while it was Nolan Mayer who made 30 saves on 32 shots for the Saskatoon Blades. So that was game number 42. So the Calgary Hitmen, after 42 games, they are a mediocre 500 team, sitting third in the Central Division, distant third when we get to the stats standings where we're getting to now. As after 42 games, they have 18 wins, 17 losses, 5 overtime losses, and 2 shootout losses for 43 points. They are third in the division, but they're a distant third, as I'll say. So now the stats and standings. We'll take a look at the leading scorers for the Calgary Hitmen and how our goaltending looks at this point. So Riley Feeder-Schultz is still leading the team in scoring at this stage. In 40 games, he has 21 goals, 29 assists for 50 points. And then Sean Shigell, after 42 games, he has 19 goals, 22 assists for 41 points. Then Blake Stevenson, he has played 46 games both in Red Deer and Calgary. He has 17 goals, 24 assists for 41 points. But since being the Calgary Hitmen in 12 games, he has 5 goals, 4 assists for 9 points. Zach Funk is 4th in scoring. He has 41 games. He has 15 goals, 12 assists for 27 points. Right at the top 5 is Cale Zimmerman, the captain. After 39 games, he has 10 goals, 9 assists for 19 points. So that's how the quick stats look for the Calgary when it comes to players. Goaltending. Braden Peters, he's definitely the workhorse, the number 1 guy. In 34 games played, he has a 16-15-2-1 record, and he has a 2 shutouts with a goals against average of .291 and a save percentage of 907, so fairly solid. And then for Ethan Bonaventure, the backup, he's played in 9 games. He has a 2-2-3-1 record, so he has been in the wrong end of it in 3 overtime games, with a .371 goals against average and an .870 save percentage. So that's the goaltending story for the stats. So now, if we take a look at the standings around the Western Hockey League before we move on to looking ahead. So let's start off West to East, as I usually do. Starting off with the U.S. Division, well, the Everett Silvertips still lead the way. They have 70 points after 44 games. And then the Portland Winterhawks, they're second. They have 61 points in 44 games. Then the Seattle Thunderbirds, after 41 games, they have 55 points. And then the Tri-City Americans, they're in 4th place. They have 30 points in 42 games. And then the Spokane Chiefs round up the U.S. Division. They're in 5th place. They have 28 points in 42 games. So now the BC Division, it was the Kamloops Blazers who are leading the way. They have 63 points in 44 games. Then the Kelowna Rockets, they've only played 39 games. They have 52 points. I think they were shut down at one point. Then the Prince George Cougars, they have 39 points in 44 games for 3rd in the division. 4th place is the Vancouver Giants in 34 points. They have 34 points in 44 games. And the Victoria Royals, they have 29 points in 43 games. So now moving over to the Eastern Conference and the Central Division, where the Calgary Hitmen are. Leading the way is the Edmonton Oil Kings after 46 games. They have 61 points. In 2nd place is the Red Deer Rebels. They have 61 points in 46 games. Then a distant 3rd, as I mentioned, the Calgary Hitmen. They have 43 points in 42 games, but they have 4 games ahead against the Red Deer Rebels, but only behind by 18 points. That's still stretching it. How are the Lethbridge Hurricanes? They're just behind us. As in 40 games, they have 39 points. So the Calgary Hitmen are going to have to keep an eye on Lethbridge. And then the Swift-Current Broncos, after 44 games, they have 37 points. And then the Massillon Tigers are in 6th place, last in the Central Division. They have 22 points in 41 games. And now the last division, the East Division, well, it's the Winnipeg Ice still leading the way. They only played 39 games, but they have 63 points. And then the Moose Jaw Warriors are in 2nd. They have 54 points in 46 games. 3rd place is the Saskatoon Blades. They have 50 points in 42 games. 4th place is the Brandon Wheat Kings. They have 46 points in 40 games. 5th place is the Regina Pats. They have 34 points in 40 games. And then the Prince Albert Raiders are in last. They have 34 points in 42 games. So definitely the East Division is stronger than the Central Division overall, considering the Winnipeg Ice was one of the top teams of the league for most of the season. So now let's take a look ahead to the next 6 games for the Calgary Hitmen, which will be the next episode. Well, the next game will be on 43 will be on Friday, February 11th, as I meant to say, as the Calgary Hitmen still continue their Saskatchewan road trip, as they will be taking on the Regina Pats in Regina at the Branch Centre, so they'll get to see more of Connor Bedard. And the game 44, this will be on Saturday, February 12th, as the Calgary Hitmen now start working their way west, as they are in Moose Jaw to take on the Moose Jaw Warriors. That'll be a 6 p.m. puck drop at Mosaic Place. And the game 45, this will be on Wednesday, February the 16th, as the Calgary Hitmen will be hosting the Moose Jaw Warriors. But let's note here, this game will not be at the Scotiabank Stadium with all the postponement games of the Calgary Flames. Calgary Hitmen had some games postponed, and the Calgary Roughnecks games had to get rejuggled around. Well, the Calgary Hitmen will be at their home away from home, as they'll be at the 7 Chiefs Sportsplex in Tutina for that'll be a 7 p.m. puck drop. And the game 46 will be on Friday, February 18th, as the Calgary Hitmen will be hosting the Winnipeg Ice. Once again, this will be at the 7 Chiefs Sportsplex at the Tutina Nation, 7 p.m. puck drop. And the game 47, this will be on Sunday, February the 20th, as the Calgary Hitmen will be hosting the Saskatoon Blades, but this game will be back at the Scotiabank Stadium. That'll be a 4 p.m. puck drop. And then on Wednesday, February 23rd, this must be the Stop Bullying game, because this game is against the Prince Albert Raiders at home, starting at 11 a.m. That's usually the game when you get a lot of school-age kids who go to the game wearing pink shirts for their Stop Bullying campaign. So these are the next 6 games for the Calgary Hitmen as they wrap up some time in Saskatchewan, and then they spend some time at their home away from home at the 7 Chiefs Sportsplex, and then they spend some time in the regular home at the Scotiabank Stadium. So that's all I have for my Calgary Hitmen in 6 for this episode. I'm definitely saying the Calgary Hitmen are definitely just trucking along, feeling so-so about things, but this is junior hockey. You always sometimes get, a couple good years with a couple group of players. You try to run with it, and then you just try to rebuild. And I'm going to say, after the trade deadline in the last episode, I think the Calgary Hitmen are kind of in this reloading phase at this stage right now. It just depends on who we draw, and maybe if they find some magic, they might be able to make a run to at least the second round. Kind of like what happened a couple years ago with the Calgary Hitmen, but this is what it is at this stage of the season. So anyway, I'd like to say, if you want to follow along this Calgary sports fans' journey, home of Flames, Hitmen, Roughnecks, and Stampeders, I mostly do talk Calgary sports on my e-channel, where I recap games and stories, but I also do a variety of non-sports content, keywords is when I have time, with personal vlogs, attempt to comedy, and I also do share my experience I'm on the road or sporting it, and I've done some vlogging to go. So that's all I have on my channel right now. So if that all sounds like it'd be interesting to watch, to follow along with this Calgary sports fans' journey, you do, just make sure you hit like and subscribe. I also have my other social links down in the description below for other ways you can follow me. And of course, my second channel in Brett Hornby Shorts, where I exclusively put my short form content on there. So I appreciate like, subscribe both here on my main channel as well as my second channel. So I was going to say, let's go Hitmen. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.